I am looking forward to Gladiator 2, and I'm hoping that at the end of the day, it's a great sequel. Right, I was not entertained. This was not why I was here. And yes, I did open my Gladiator 2 review quoting Gladiator 1 because that's all this film does. And quite poorly, might I add. Look, the trailers for Gladiator 2 were fine. Like, aside from that really bad Kanye West needle drop, the trailers were fine. I was like, okay, there seems to be like an interesting story going on. Granted, the trailers revealed way too much, but still, there was like an interesting concept of a story here. And after having seen the film, I thought, okay, there is a story here. It's just told poorly. Going into the film, the trailers made me think the film was going to be like an averagely decent film. Like, I was going to be at least entertained. No, this film is bad. Like, really bad. It also doesn't help that I recently saw a re-release of Gladiator on the big screen. And seeing that film on the big screen the way it was intended, it was magical. So, going from that film to this film... God, what a shocking difference. But before we get into the shit show that was Gladiator 2, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, follow me on social media. It's all down in the description. And follow me specifically on Instagram and TikTok. That's where I'm most active. Plug EF Manar. Before we get into the video, I just want to quickly plug my latest short film, The Shining Optimism of EF Manar. Keep the spark alive. As dreamer and optimist E.F. Manar must find a way to keep his hopes and passions alive in a cynical world. Inspired by Wonka and The Greatest Showman, a lot of time, effort, love, and passion was put into this project, so I would really appreciate it if you guys could give it a watch. The film is linked down below in the description, and it's also on the homepage of my YouTube channel. I hope you guys watch it and really enjoy it. Anyways, back to the video. Like, the thing is with Gladiator 2, and it's kind of ironic, is that the sequel to Gladiator is essentially every film that rips off Gladiator. Like, every film after 2000 that tried to be a Roman epic and tried to be like Gladiator. This film is. That Pompeii film with Kit Harington, it's exactly that. Same plot, same character, same personality. The only reason why this film stands a chance of being somewhat well received by audiences and critics is because they want to like it because it has the name Gladiator. Like, this film sucks. Like, say for example, if this film was called like Son of Rome, people would think this film sucks.
I have something in you. Rage.
It feels exactly like those mid-budget Greek mythology epics, like that Hercules film. I remember those two Hercules films that released in the same year. I'm talking about the other one, not the one with The Rock. Ben-Hur, Kit Harington's Pompeii. That's what I mean. You watch Gladiator 2, and I won't lie, this film is pretty much just Pompeii, but without a volcano. Like, it's kind of funny how the sequel to Gladiator is a pale imitation of Gladiator, and it ends up being in the same bracket as those mid-budget Gladiator ripoffs. Like, there are so many times throughout the film where it goes, hey, have you seen Gladiator? Honestly, the amount of times in this film when they just kept quoting the first film was just ridiculous. Maximus Decimus Meridius, I will have my vengeance in this life or the next. Strength and honor! And it's like, stop. And the thing is that right from the get-go, the opening credits are bizarre because it recaps the first film, but it recaps all the memeable moments from the first film. Like, there's an animatic of Commodus going, ugh, or like Maximus's death, and Maximus's death in many ways can be memed on the internet. It has been memed on the internet. In context of the film, it's great, but in context of Gladiator 2, it looks like a joke. Not to mention that from the get-go, we get opening text that basically goes, oh yeah, 14 years have passed, and everything that Maximus stood for at the end of Gladiator 1, the idea of change and the Republic and the dream of Rome that Marcus Aurelius wanted, yeah, that's all forgotten now. Not to mention the fact that there's that really important line from the first film, which is, whatever you do today will be echoed throughout eternity. Everything Maximus did does not echo throughout eternity. That new idea of a republic that he started doesn't come to fruition. There's just suddenly 2 new emperors in charge. The world building for that is really poor because they don't explain how they took charge. Like, the movie just actively goes out of its way to contradict the ending to Gladiator 1. And it's like, why are we doing this? This is just... it's not good. Like, Senator Gracchus is in this film, and he doesn't really do anything, but I thought he was there in the first film to set up the idea of a new Rome. But in the 14 years that passed, he didn't do anything. Also, speaking of years, the film changes how old Lucius is. Well, kind of. In the sense of, like, one of the senators is talking about Lucilla's son Lucius and was like, oh, he must have been about 12 when he disappeared. Yet, in Gladiator 1, there's clearly a scene where Maximus asks young Lucius how old he is, and he says 8, and he's like, oh, My son is nearly 8. And I don't know if they changed Lucius's age just so they made it seem like Maximus didn't cheat on his wife. But I don't know why they had to change Lucius's age. You could have just said that Maximus met his wife after he slept with Lucilla. Maximus is also pretty much forgotten. He's like an urban legend in the Gladiator community, and it's like, what? What? How did that happen? That doesn't make any sense. Is this how Rome treats its heroes? Although the film tries to do some like thematic thing about Rome treating its heroes poorly and all that kind of stuff, but it doesn't really do anything. Like, yeah, it kind of pays off a little bit in terms of General Acacius's men are loyal to Lucius, who now wants to fight back for the throne, and they kind of like rally behind him at the end, but it's like, the film doesn't really do enough to really, like, hammer home that idea. Like, you know, the first film, it's all about, like, you know, a slave dares to defy an emperor and ends up toppling an empire. The idea of winning the crowd and you end up appealing to the mob and, you know, the mob then becomes your army and all that kind of stuff. That is, like, the thematic point of the first Gladiator. Gladiator 2 tries to bring up that point, but it doesn't really do anything with it. Like, again, on paper or wax tablet, whatever you want to call it, there is an interesting story here. It just wasn't told. And then let's talk about Lucius, played by Paul Mescal. And look, I like Paul Mescal. I don't understand, like, the crazy hype around him. I think he's a good actor. And I think he's more than capable of leading a film like this. The problem is that Lucius is a plank of wood. And he does the absolute best he can with the character he's given. But Lucius sucks as a character.
Strength and honor!
And the thing is too, is that he falls into the archetype of every Gladiator ripoff. He's characterized the same way Kit Harington's character, I think his name is Milo in Pompeii. They're characterized the exact same way. They're all wooden and stern, and they all talk like this because they're all stoic and masculine. But hey, every so often we'll say something sarcastic and witty to treat the audience that we have some semblance of personality. No, it sucks. Lucius is a really bad character. Like, there's this scene at the end where he tries to rally the gladiators to create the new Rome and fight for their freedom, and it is the most generic, hollow-ass speech, and he's calling them to arms, he's rallying them, come on, let us fight for the new Rome. It is the most generic-ass speech ever, and Paul Mescal is trying his absolute hardest. But that speech, the writing of that speech, sucks. Like, there is no personality to Lucius. Like, Maximus, yes, is the stoic masculine archetype, but there is a depth and a charisma to him. Russell Crowe's performance, whilst I don't think is necessarily Oscar-worthy, is layered and deep. And that is not me taking away from Russell Crowe's performance. I think he acts that role perfectly. I also just don't think that Maximus is a character to where I'm like, yes, that is an Oscar-worthy performance. Like, he's good, don't get me wrong, but like, Oscar-worthy? But even still, there is a pathos to Maximus. There is a history, there is layers, there is depth. You feel his warmth when he needs to be warm. You feel his despair. Russell Crowe's performance is great in that film. The character of Maximus is great. Lucius is a plank of wood. He has the obligatory wife that ends up dying in battle, but like, he kind of forgets about it halfway through the film. Throughout token moments of the film, he'll bring up this ring that belonged to him, like, oh, this is my wife's ring and I wear it to remember her by. But you don't feel the fact that he's trying to remember his wife. You don't feel the fact that he is fighting for his wife. And speaking of revenge, Pedro Pascal plays the character that Paul Mescal wants to get revenge on. But you find out that Pedro Pascal is married to Connie Nielsen's character, Lucilla, from the first film. And obviously Lucilla is Lucius's mother. So there is interesting conflict there. And Pedro Pascal delivers a fine performance. But one, I'm kind of tired of seeing Pedro Pascal in everything. Like, he's a good actor, but his overexposure is hurting his image to me as an audience member because he's everywhere. Like, Pedro Pascal did not need to play this character. Pedro Pascal did nothing to define this character. This character could have been played by anyone. And two, the character dynamics are interesting, but the film does nothing with it. It builds to a false climax where Paul Mescal is now confronting General Acacius. They are fighting in the gladiatorial arena. General Acacius is fighting Lucius in the pits because the Empress caught him trying to overthrow them, and he threw them in the pit because he's a traitor, and it all builds to Acacius and Lucius fighting, and Acacius realizes, oh no, that's Lucilla's son, I can't kill him, but Acacius and his men killed Lucius's wife. That is an interesting concept. However, the film does nothing with it because Acacius just doesn't fight Lucius, and then Lucius just lets go of his anger and rage just because. He does not build up to it. There is nothing in the character that is telling him, no, I can't do this, that is my mother's husband. It's not shown on screen. Lucius just goes, alright, I'm not gonna kill him now just because I have to. It's so lazy and ugh. Denzel Washington is fine as Denzel Washington because he's just playing Denzel Washington. Like, he's fine, but like, the character he's playing is like there's an interesting backstory to a point, but it's not like fully fleshed out. We're just told about his backstory through exposition, and it's like he's trying to manipulate the string so he can become emperor, but it's not really compelling to watch, especially because Denzel feels out of place, which is weird because Denzel is a fantastic actor, yet his acting is very contemporary, but he's in a period historical epic. And there are some dumb things between Denzel Washington's character, I won't lie, I've forgotten his name, and Lucius. It's like, the big climax of the film is them fighting in a river, but somehow, and as proven by the Jake Paul and Mike Tyson fight, this 25, 28-year-old man is struggling to beat this 60-year-old, 70-year-old man. And then there are just some moments where I feel like Denzel just went like, oh no, I'm not gonna do that for like vanity's sake. Like, there's a bit where Lucius cuts off his hand. There's no reaction. He just looks at his hand bleeding. There's no like scream of pain or agony which would actually happen. He just looks at his hand and I'm like, why is he not screaming? This film was rated R. And then Lucius just stabs him. And do you know what? This brings me onto a tangent. Armor in this film is so contradictory because 1 minute it's boiled hard leather and it's really easy and penetrable. The other second they act like this hard boiled leather is like steel. Like Pedro Pascal can get impaled by a bunch of arrows, but all of a sudden when Denzel Washington is trying to stab Lucius in the river, there is enough resistance against the sword strike that it won't penetrate through leather armor. It's weird. It's so like annoying. And look, these could be considered nitpicks. In a better film, these would be nitpicks and not problems. However, the film's story is not compelling. It's the same Gladiator film, but worse. Connie Nielsen's Lucilla is just in this film to cry. Like, every other scene she's in, she's crying. And also too, there's a scene that really sticks out to me to where they're in the Colosseum, Lucius is like fighting around and she's like been put in the Colosseum as like she's a traitor or whatever. She gets shot in the chest by Denzel Washington and she just looks at Lucius in the face. This is like their big like connecting moment as she dies and she's like, "Go my son," with utter clarity despite being shot in the chest, directly like in the heart. God, this movie's like ridiculously stupid. And then there's this really stupid bit too where earlier on in the film, during like the big rhino animal fight, you know, Paul Mescal walks in, right, he grabs the gravel off the ground and immediately she's just like, Maximus. She just gets a weird flashback to Maximus and I'm like, but why? He didn't do the hand rub thing. He just picked up gravel. So you're telling me that before this fight, no one in the Colosseum dared to pick up gravel, and if they did she just immediately think of Maximus? Like, you're telling me in previous fights no one picked up gravel to throw in someone's face? Like, that's stupid. But anyway, the thing with the gravel thing that I want to bring up is that, you know, this rhino is charging at Paul Mescal. He picks up the gravel, throws the dust in the air, is basically standing in the dust cloud so he can't even see, and then he ends up getting hit by the rhino. So what was the point of the distraction if he gets hit by the rhino? I know, before I get into my complaints and nitpicks about the film, Joseph Quinn and the other actor play twins, and yeah, they're fine. The twins are just buffoons. They're just here to be dumb and stupid, which on the one hand I do kind of like, because I like that Denzel's character kills Joseph Quinn, even though I feel like Joseph Quinn was the more, you know, enjoyable of the two actors. I do like the fact that Denzel was like, I'm gonna take the dumbest emperor and control him like a puppet. Also, where was Djimon Hounsou's character? Like, how do you do a sequel to Gladiator and not bring him back despite the fact that he is the last character in that film? He is the last character you see in that film, so why is he not in this one? Also, speaking of oversaturated actors, Matt Lucas showing up as the Colosseum announcer. Again, I just looked at the screen and went, I've seen you in way too many things. Seeing Matt Lucas on screen is not special. I don't enjoy their screen presence as much as I should because they're just overused. They're everywhere. That took me out of it. Again, I feel like Hollywood needs to learn the lesson of you can't keep overusing actors because if you do, them showing up on screen either becomes annoying or you kind of just go, not them again. I've seen them way too many times and it's just them playing them. Okay, complaints, nitpicks, whatever you want to call this section. There is so much of this film that I cringed at. Like, when Lucius puts on Maximus's armor at the end, like, why? Why are we doing this? Why movie? Why does he have to wear Maximus's armor? Oh, is it because in the first film, young Lucius saw Maximus wearing his armor and he talked about the two horses and stuff? Why did he have to wear the armor? Him taking up his father's sword was perfectly fine. Also, speaking of that, the scene where Lucilla reveals to Lucius that Maximus is his father is so just... It's so rushy. She's all just like, oh, if you don't love me, then at least, you know, admire your father, Maximus Decimus Meridius. And it's like, oh my god. Really? There's so many eye-rolling moments like that. Like, the thing that I cringed at probably the most was the ending where Lucius goes into the Colosseum. He's like touching the gravel and he's like, talk to me, father. And then they played the same music that ended Gladiator 1, and they end the film on the wheat shot, which is just embarrassing because that is the best shot of the film. This film is visually ugly and boring. It looks like most modern blockbusters. It's really flat and grey, and again, this wouldn't be like a major complaint if I'd not just seen the first one, which is one of the most visually striking films ever. And this film just looks so flat and grey. The action is also really forgettable too. Like the Colosseum fights, like the rhino fight is alright, but then like the naval battle is just really dumb. Like, one, it's cool that they flood the Colosseum, but how are the waves generated by the flooding? Two, why were there sharks there? And three, I kind of zoned out of that action scene. Like, it was kind of boring. Like, it starts off alright, like, you know, they're sailing in and Paul Mescal's like, on your mark, or whatever. And then I kind of zoned out, and then I jumped back into the scene where Paul Mescal tried to shoot Pedro Pascal. And if I zoned out of the scene, that just shows that the film isn't engaging. A lot of the CGI is terrible too. Like, that CGI monkey fight was just bad. Also, speaking of scenes they rip off from the first film, but for no real reason, the scene where Lucius is being tested by Denzel Washington's, you know, men, and they're trying to see if he can fight. They rip off the same scene from Gladiator 1, but the difference is that Maximus has a reason not to fight. Or more so, Ridley Scott demonstrates the reason as to why Maximus doesn't want to fight. We've seen that Maximus wants to die to be with his wife and child. Lucius just doesn't fight because, and when he does fight, his opponent is wearing spiked gloves, so when Lucius gets punched in the face, he's just getting like a couple of little cuts on his face, a couple of little bruises. No, he should be bleeding. His face should be bloody and pummeled. Like, what is going on here? This film isn't PG-13, it's rated R, so where is the blood? Again, if this film did not have the title or the license of Gladiator in it, and it was called Romulus, you know, Heir to Rome or something, people would hate this film. Just, Now, I do want to quickly speak a little bit about score, because this film's score is really forgettable, and it's surprising too because the composer of this film is Harry Gregson Williams. Harry Gregson Williams is a great composer. His Kingdom of Heaven score is great, and the Narnia theme fucking slaps. But the music in this film is so unmemorable until they just start playing tracks in the first film, and even still, it just doesn't hit as well. Like, again, I cringed at the ending to this film when they played the same music that ended the first Gladiator, because it wasn't earned. It wasn't deserved. The film was just trying really hard to go, hey, do you remember Gladiator? Isn't that a great film? Like, again, I went into this film not wanting to hate it. I wanted to like it. I thought it was going to be a decent film. Like, the trailers at the very least made it seem like it was going to be, you know, good, passable, watchable. Yeah, I'm glad I watched that. No, the film just sucks. And the thing is too is that if you break the story down plot point by plot point, there is an interesting story here. Its execution is terrible. The idea of Lucius trying to get revenge against his mother's new husband is a great idea, only for them to realize that they share a common goal. Like, that's a really good idea. The film just does an absolutely terrible job at executing it. The film is so focused too on nostalgia bait, and it doesn't work. And the thing is too is that you could make it work. Lucius saw Maximus fight in the gladiatorial. He literally ran around the palace going like, Maximus the Merciful, I want to be a gladiator like Maximus. So when he steps into the arena, instead of like, you know, just having him pick up gravel and sort of going, Maximus, why doesn't he go into the arena, pick up the gravel and be like his hero and rub his hands and go, I'm like Maximus? That makes so much more sense. Like, he does it later on in the film. But at that point, it's not like the first thing you think he would have done if you want to go nostalgia baity. It's like the writers of this film didn't think. It's like, you can do a Gladiator sequel that is filled with nostalgia bait and works. This just is the perfect example of the type of film like that is Top Gun Maverick. Also, speaking, no one mentions Commodus, like, at all. He's just completely forgotten about. Yeah, I think that's kind of it. I'm kind of done with this film. This film's not good. It sucks. And really, it's kind of just solidifying my point that 2024 is a pretty bad year for film. Like, aside from Challengers and The Fall Guy and a few other, like, handful of, you know, enjoyable-ish type of films, the best film of the year, and I say this with utter confidence right now, is Doom Part 2. And it's kind of funny how in my trailer reaction for Gladiator 2, I jokingly said, imagine if Doom Part 2 had a better gladiatorial arena sequence than Gladiator 2. And it did. The fade route the Colosseum stuff is so much more interesting than this entire film. But yeah, those are my thoughts on Gladiator 2. It's not a good film. It's terrible. But I do know some people are enjoying this film. I don't know how, but they are. If you enjoyed the film, let me know why in the comments down below. If you didn't, let me know why in the comments down below. Like, comment, subscribe, follow me on social media, all the good stuff. Until we meet again, see you guys next time. Is this how Rome treats its heroes?